The cry that split the frozen dawn air of December 1882 was so faint that Austin Blake nearly missed it over the howling wind that swept across his ranch outside Kennewick, Washington. He had been up before first light, as always, preparing to check on the cattle before the winter storm that had been threatening finally descended upon the territory. His hand was on the doorknob when he heard it again, a thin wail that made his blood run cold. Someone had left something on his porch, and whatever it was alive. Austin yanked open the heavy wooden door, and the sight that met his eyes made him freeze in place. There, bundled in what looked like rough wool blankets of varying colors, was a basket. The cry came again, louder this time, and Austin dropped to his knees beside it. His rough, calloused fingers pulled back the edge of the wool, and he found himself staring down at a tiny red face, screwed up in misery and cold. An infant, no more than a few weeks old by the look of it, had been abandoned on his doorstep in the middle of one of the coldest winters Washington Territory had seen in years. "Jesus Christ," Austin breathed, and without thinking, he scooped up the entire basket and brought it inside, kicking the door shut against the wind. The baby's cries intensified now that he was moving, thin arms flailing against the confines of the blankets. Austin had never held a baby in his life. At 32 years old, he had spent the last decade building his ranch from nothing, working dawn to dusk, sleeping alone in his small but sturdy house, and avoiding the kind of entanglements that led to families. He raised cattle and horses, not children. But this baby did not care about Austin's plans or his inexperience. The infant was wailing now, a sound that seemed impossibly loud for such a tiny creature. Austin set the basket on his kitchen table and stared down at it, his mind racing. The wool blankets were damp from snow, and when he touched the baby's cheek, the skin was far too cold. He needed to warm this child up, and fast. Moving with the kind of efficiency he brought to every task, Austin stoked the fire in his stove until it roared, then carefully lifted the baby from the basket. The infant was lighter than he expected, a fragile bundle that fit awkwardly in his large hands. He unwrapped the wet wool, revealing a simple cotton gown that was also damp. Beneath that was a squirming, furious baby with a shock of dark hair and eyes that were screwed shut against the injustice of the world. All right, Austin muttered, his voice gruff. "Let me think here." He had clean towels, at least. He stripped the baby out of the wet clothes with fumbling fingers, wrapped the tiny body in a soft, dry towel, and held it close to his chest, trying to share his body heat. The crying did not stop, but it changed pitch slightly, becoming less desperate and more demanding. Austin had grown up with younger siblings back in Missouri before he headed west, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a memory surfaced. Babies cried for 3 reasons. They were cold, they were wet, or they were hungry. He had solved the cold problem mostly. The baby was not wet in the other sense, as far as he could tell, though he had no idea how to check properly and was not eager to learn. That left hunger, and Austin's heart sank. He had no milk, no bottles, no idea what to feed an infant. He had coffee, salt pork, beans, flour, and not much else. None of that was suitable for a baby. The wind rattled the windows, reminding him that the storm was coming. He could not ride into town now, not with the weather turning and not with a baby to care for. Austin paced his small kitchen, the infant cradled against his shoulder, trying to think. There had to be something he could do. His nearest neighbor was the Murphy family, about 3 miles east, but they had moved to Portland for the winter months to stay with family. The next closest was old Sam Chen, a Chinese immigrant who ran a small trading post about 5 miles north, But Austin doubted Sam had any more experience with babies than he did. Then he remembered Prudence Ortega. Prudence ran a boarding house in Kennewick, or she had the last time Austin had been to town 2 weeks ago. More importantly, she was a woman, and women knew about babies. The problem was that Kennewick was a good 8 miles from his ranch, and the sky was already darkening with the promise of snow. But what choice did he have? This baby needed proper care, and Austin was out of his depth. He looked down at the infant, whose cries had finally subsided into hiccuping whimpers. The tiny face was still red but no longer quite so mottled. Dark eyes, barely focused, seemed to look up at him, and Austin felt something twist in his chest. Who would leave a baby out in the cold like this? What kind of desperation would drive someone to abandon their child on a stranger's doorstep? "All right, little one," he said softly. "We are going to take a ride. You just hold on." Austin worked quickly. He wrapped the baby in every dry, soft piece of fabric he could find, creating a cocoon that left only the small face visible. He tucked the bundle inside his heavy coat, against his chest, then buttoned the coat over it. The baby was so small that it barely made a bulge. He pulled on his warmest gloves, his hat, and grabbed the wool blankets from the basket, shaking off the snow and folding them to create an extra layer of protection. His horse, a sturdy roan gelding named Copper, was not pleased about being saddled in the pre-dawn darkness with a storm coming, but the animal was well trained and stood still while Austin mounted awkwardly, trying not to jostle the baby too much. The infant made a small sound of protest, but did not start crying again. Austin took that as a good sign. The ride to Kennewick was brutal. The wind picked up within the first mile, driving snow into Austin's face and making visibility nearly impossible. He kept Copper to a steady walk, trusting the horse to find the road even when Austin could barely see it. Inside his coat, the baby was warm and mostly quiet, though every small movement reminded Austin of the precious cargo he carried. His arms ached from holding the reins with one hand, while keeping the other pressed protectively over the bundle at his chest. It took nearly 2 hours to cover the 8 miles, and by the time Austin rode into Kennewick, full daylight had arrived, though the sky was so thick with clouds and snow that it barely made a difference. The town was small, just a handful of buildings clustered along the Columbia River, but it was growing. The railroad had come through 5 years earlier, and with it had come new opportunities and new people. Prudence Ortega's boarding house was easy to spot, a 2-story building with a wide porch and a sign that read "Clean Rooms, Fair Prices" hanging above the door. Smoke rose from the chimney, a welcome sign of warmth and life. Austin dismounted stiffly, his legs numb from the cold, and tied Copper to the hitching post. He climbed the steps to the porch and pounded on the door with his free hand. For a long moment, nothing happened. Austin pounded again, harder this time, and finally he heard footsteps inside. The door swung open, and Prudence Ortega stood there, her dark eyes widening in surprise. "Mr. Blake," she said, her voice carrying a faint trace of the Spanish accent she had mostly lost over the years. "What on earth are you doing out in this weather?" "I need help," Austin said bluntly. His teeth were chattering and he could barely feel his face. "I have a baby." Prudence's eyes dropped to his coat, where a small, muffled sound was emerging. Her expression changed instantly from surprise to alarm. "Get inside," she said, stepping back and pulling the door wide. "Quickly, before you both freeze." Austin stumbled into the warmth of the boarding house, and Prudence shut the door firmly behind him. She was a tall woman, nearly as tall as Austin's own 6 feet, with long black hair pulled back in a practical braid, and a face that was striking rather than pretty. She wore a simple dress of dark blue wool and an apron, and her hands moved with quick efficiency as she helped Austin unbutton his coat. "What happened?" she demanded as the baby emerged from the folds of fabric, still wrapped in its cocoon of blankets. "Where did you get a baby?" "Someone left it on my doorstep this morning," Austin said. He was shaking now, whether from cold or shock or the sheer strangeness of the situation, he could not say. "Just left it there in a basket, wrapped in wet wool. I did not know what else to do, so I brought it here." Prudence took the baby from him with practiced ease, cradling the small bundle in her arms and peeling back the layers to examine the infant. Her face was grave as she checked the tiny body, but after a moment she nodded. "Cold, but not dangerously so. You got here in time. Boy or girl?" Austin realized he had no idea. "I do not know," he admitted. Prudence's lips quirked very slightly, the closest thing to a smile Austin had seen from her. "Well, let us find out, shall we?" She carried the baby to a table near the fireplace and gently unwrapped the towel. "A boy," she announced after a moment. "A few weeks old, I would guess. Underweight, but otherwise he seems healthy enough." "He was crying something fierce when I found him," Austin said. He stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, dripping melted snow onto Prudence's clean floor. "I figured he was hungry, but I did not have anything to feed him." "Of course not," Prudence said. She was already moving, rewrapping the baby in a soft blanket she pulled from a cupboard. "Wait here." She disappeared up the stairs with the baby, leaving Austin alone in the boarding house's main room. It was a pleasant space, clean and well kept, with comfortable furniture and curtains on the windows. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the smell of baking bread drifted from what must be the kitchen. Austin had been in Kennewick plenty of times over the years, but he had never been inside Prudence's boarding house. He had no need for lodging when he had his own place, and their paths rarely crossed otherwise. He knew of her, of course. Everyone in Kennewick knew Prudence Ortega. She had arrived in town about 3 years earlier, a widow from California with enough money to buy the old Peterson place and turn it into a boarding house. She kept to herself mostly, ran her business with quiet efficiency, and did not encourage gossip. There were rumors, naturally. Some said her husband had been a wealthy rancher who died in an accident. Others claimed she had fled some scandal down south. But Prudence never spoke of her past, and the people of Kennewick had learned to respect her privacy. Austin respected her for that. He understood the value of keeping your history to yourself. He had come to Washington Territory to build something new, to leave behind the memories of Missouri and the war and everything that came after. A man did not need to air his past like dirty laundry for everyone to see. Prudence returned after about 10 minutes, this time without the baby. "I have him settled upstairs in a warm bed," she said. "One of my boarders, Mrs. Chen, has a baby of her own. She is nursing him now." Austin felt relief wash over him so strongly that his knees nearly buckled. "Thank you," he said, and meant it. "I did not know where else to go." Prudence studied him with those dark, assessing eyes. "You did the right thing bringing him here," she said, "but we need to talk about what happens next. Sit down before you fall down, Mr. Blake. You look half frozen." Austin realized she was right. Now that the immediate crisis was over, exhaustion was hitting him like a physical blow. He sank into a chair near the fire and pulled off his hat, running a hand through his damp hair. Prudence disappeared again and returned with a cup of coffee, strong and hot. Austin wrapped his hands around it gratefully. "You have any idea who left the baby?" Prudence asked, settling into a chair across from him. Austin shook his head. "No note, nothing. Just the basket and the wool blankets. I did not recognize them." Prudence's expression was troubled. "Someone desperate," she said quietly. To leave a baby out in this cold, they must have been desperate indeed. Or cruel, Austin said, unable to keep the anger out of his voice. Perhaps, Prudence allowed, but I think desperation is more likely. A cruel person would simply have let the child die. Someone who took the time to wrap him and bring him to your door, they wanted him to live. They chose you for a reason, Mr. Blake. Austin had not thought of it that way. But why me? He asked. I am just a rancher. I live alone. I do not know the first thing about babies. Surely there were better choices. Perhaps they thought a rancher would be practical, Prudence said. Someone who would not panic, who would know how to deal with a crisis. Or perhaps they knew you were a good man. Austin did not feel like a good man right now. He felt overwhelmed and out of his depth. What am I supposed to do with a baby? He asked, and heard the desperation in his own voice. That depends, Prudence said. You could take him to the sheriff, report that you found him. The town would take responsibility, try to find him a home. And if they could not find one, Prudence's silence was answer enough. Orphanages existed, but they were few and far between out here in the territories, and the ones that did exist were overcrowded and underfunded. A baby's chances in such a place were not good. Or, Prudence continued, you could keep him. Austin stared at her. Keep him? I just told you I do not know anything about raising a child. No one does, not at first, Prudence said, but people learn. You seem like a capable man, Mr. Blake. If you wanted to, you could learn. But I am alone, Austin protested. I have a ranch to run. How am I supposed to care for a baby and manage 1,000 head of cattle? You would need help, Prudence agreed. But help can be found if you are willing to accept it. There was something in the way she said it that made Austin look at her more closely. Prudence met his gaze steadily, and he saw something in her eyes that he had not noticed before. Loneliness, perhaps, or a kind of hunger that had nothing to do with food. Before he could pursue that thought, footsteps sounded on the stairs and a small Chinese woman appeared carrying the baby. He finished eating, she said in heavily accented English. Very hungry baby, he sleep now. Thank you, Mrs. Chen, Prudence said warmly. She rose and took the baby, who was indeed sleeping peacefully, his tiny face relaxed and content. She carried him over to Austin. Would you like to hold him? Austin hesitated, then held out his arms. Prudence placed the baby in them with care, adjusting his hold until the infant was cradled properly. Austin looked down at the small, sleeping face and felt that strange twist in his chest again. This baby had no one. Someone had abandoned him, left him to an uncertain fate, but he had survived. He was warm and fed and safe, at least for now. What is your name, Mr. Blake? Prudence asked suddenly. Austin, he said, still looking at the baby. Austin Blake. Well, Austin, Prudence said, and he noticed that she used his first name with easy familiarity. I think you have a decision to make, but you do not have to make it right this moment. The storm is getting worse, and you cannot ride back to your ranch in this weather. You should stay here until it passes. Austin wanted to argue, but the truth was she was right. Through the windows, he could see that the snow was coming down in thick sheets now, driven by wind that made the whole building creak. Riding back to the ranch in this would be suicide, with or without a baby. I will pay for a room, he said. Prudence waved a hand dismissively. You brought a baby through a blizzard to get help. I think I can offer you a room for free just this once. She showed him upstairs to a small but comfortable room with a bed, a chair, and a cradle that she must have borrowed from Mrs. Chen. Austin laid the baby in the cradle with extreme care, then sat on the edge of the bed, watching the infant sleep. His mind was spinning with questions and worries and the sheer impossibility of the situation. He must have dozed off eventually, because the next thing he knew, Prudence was shaking his shoulder gently. Austin, she said softly, It is time for supper. The baby is still sleeping, but he will wake soon and be hungry again. Mrs. Chen can feed him once more, but after that, we will need to find another solution. Austin followed her downstairs to a dining room where several other boarders were already seated. Prudence introduced them quickly. Mrs. Chen and her husband Sam, who ran the trading post Austin had thought of earlier, a traveling salesman named Mr. Davis, and an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who was visiting her son in Kennewick. They all looked at Austin with open curiosity, and he realized that news of the abandoned baby had already spread through the household. The meal was simple but good: roast chicken, potatoes, bread, and vegetables. Austin ate mechanically, barely tasting the food. His thoughts kept returning to the baby upstairs, to the impossible decision Prudence had laid before him. Could he really keep the child? Could he become a father overnight, just like that, Mr. Blake, Mrs. Patterson said suddenly, her voice quavering with age but firm with conviction. That was a Christian thing you did, saving that poor baby. Not many men would have taken the trouble. I could not very well leave him to freeze, Austin said gruffly. No, but you could have brought him to the sheriff and washed your hands of the matter, Mrs. Patterson persisted. Instead, you rode through a storm to get him help. That speaks to your character, young man. Austin did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. But he felt Prudence's eyes on him, thoughtful and assessing. After supper, Mrs. Chen brought the baby down once more to nurse him. Austin watched, feeling awkward and out of place as the infant fed eagerly. When the baby was done, Mrs. Chen handed him to Prudence, who in turn offered him to Austin. You should get used to holding him, she said, if you decide to keep him. Austin took the baby, who was awake now and looking around with unfocused eyes. The infant made a small sound, not quite a cry but a kind of questioning noise, and Austin found himself automatically rocking slightly, the way he had seen women do with babies. The sound stopped, and the baby seemed to settle against him. You are a natural, Prudence said, and there was approval in her voice. I do not feel like one, Austin admitted. I feel like I am going to break him. Babies are tougher than they look, Prudence assured him, though they need constant care, especially one this young. Feeding every few hours, changing, keeping warm. It is not easy work. How do you know so much about it? Austin asked. He realized immediately that the question might be too personal, but Prudence did not seem offended. I had a daughter, she said quietly, a long time ago. She died when she was 2 years old. Fever. I am sorry, Austin said, and meant it. He saw the shadow of old grief cross Prudence's face there and gone in an instant. It was a long time ago, she repeated, but you do not forget these things. You do not forget how to care for a baby, even when years have passed. They sat in silence for a while, watching the baby. Outside, the storm howled, but inside, the boarding house was warm and safe. Austin felt a strange sense of peace, sitting here with this woman he barely knew and this baby who had been thrust into his life without warning. I have been thinking, Prudence said finally, about what you said earlier about not being able to manage alone. You were right. A baby needs more than one person can give, especially when that person has a ranch to run. But what if you did not have to do it alone? Austin looked at her. What are you suggesting? Prudence took a breath, and he saw that she was nervous, though she hid it well. I am suggesting that you might need help, and I am suggesting that I might be willing to provide that help. I do not understand, Austin said, though he was beginning to think that he did. My boarding house runs itself, more or less, Prudence said. I have good boarders, people who pay on time and cause no trouble. But it is not what I thought it would be. I am 30 years old, Mr. Blake. I have been a widow for 5 years. I run a business, I have security, but I do not have a life. Not a real one. And you think caring for a baby would give you that? Austin asked. I think caring for a baby might give us both that, Prudence said. She met his eyes squarely. I am not suggesting anything improper, but if you decided to keep this child, you would need help. You would need someone who knows how to care for an infant, someone who could live at your ranch and be there when you cannot. In return, that someone would have a home, a purpose, a reason to get up in the morning that goes beyond collecting rent and changing bed linens. Austin stared at her. You want to come live at my ranch, to help raise a baby that neither of us has any claim to. When you put it like that, it sounds insane, Prudence admitted. But is it really? You need help. I am offering it. We are both adults, both alone, both capable of making our own decisions. Why should we not help each other? People would talk, Austin said. People always talk, Prudence replied. Let them. We would know the truth of it. Austin looked down at the baby in his arms. The infant was falling asleep again, warm and full in content. In the space of a single day, this child had somehow become the center of Austin's entire world. He could not imagine handing him over to the sheriff, consigning him to an uncertain future in an orphanage, or with strangers who might not care for him properly. But he also could not imagine managing alone. This is crazy, he said aloud. Yes, Prudence agreed, but sometimes the crazy choice is the right one. What about your boarding house? I can sell it, Prudence said, or rent it out to someone else to manage. I have options. Austin thought about his ranch, the house he had built with his own hands. It was a good house, solid and warm, with 2 bedrooms upstairs and a large main room downstairs. There was plenty of space for Prudence, for the baby, for a life that suddenly seemed possible in a way it never had before. I need time to think, he said finally. Of course, Prudence said. Take all the time you need. The storm will last another day at least. We have time. But even as she said it, Austin knew that his decision was already made. He had made it the moment he picked up that basket and brought the baby inside. He had made it when he rode through a blizzard to get help. He had made it when he held this tiny, helpless creature and felt something in his chest that might have been his heart waking up after a long sleep. The storm lasted 2 more days. During that time, Austin learned more about babies than he had ever wanted to know. He learned how to change a diaper, though his first several attempts were clumsy disasters that left both him and the baby in need of fresh clothes. He learned how to hold the baby upright after feeding to help with gas, learned the difference between a hungry cry and a tired cry and a wet cry. He learned that babies were unpredictable and demanding and utterly exhausting. He also learned that Prudence Ortega was one of the most capable women he had ever met. She moved through the work of caring for the baby with calm efficiency, but also with tenderness that surprised him. She sang to the infant in Spanish, soft lullabies that made the baby's eyes drift closed. She showed Austin how to test the temperature of milk on his wrist, how to support the baby's head, how to swaddle tightly to help him sleep. And Austin learned about Prudence herself. She had been born in California, the daughter of a Spanish landowner and his wife. She had married young, at 18, to a man her father had chosen. The marriage had not been happy, but it had produced a daughter, and Prudence had loved her child with a fierceness that still echoed in her voice when she spoke of her. When the fever came and took her daughter, something in Prudence had broken. Her husband had blamed her, irrationally, for not saving the child. The marriage had deteriorated rapidly after that, and when her husband died in a riding accident 2 years later, Prudence had felt relief more than grief. I know that makes me sound heartless, she said one evening as they sat together near the fire with the baby sleeping between them in his basket. But I cannot lie about it. I did not love him. I had tried, but love cannot be forced. No, Austin agreed. "It cannot." "What about you?" Prudence asked. "Have you ever been married?" Austin shook his head. "Came close once. A girl back in Missouri before the war, but I went off to fight, and when I came back she had married someone else. Could not blame her. I was gone 3 years and we had made no promises." "Do you regret it?" Austin considered that. "I regret the war," he said finally. "I regret a lot of things about those years. But not losing her, no. I think we would have made each other miserable if we had married. She wanted things I could not give her. Stability, a town life, a husband who came home every night at the same time. That was never going to be me." "What are you then?" Prudence asked. There was genuine curiosity in her voice, not judgment. "A man who likes his own company," Austin said. "Someone who does not mind hard work and long hours. Someone who finds peace in watching the sun rise over the mountains and knowing that the land I am standing on is mine because I worked for it." "That sounds lonely," Prudence observed. "It has been," Austin admitted, "but I chose it. I could have stayed in Missouri, found a wife, settled into a quiet life, but I wanted something different. I wanted to build something that was mine. And now," Prudence gestured to the baby, "this was not part of your plan." "No," Austin agreed, "but maybe plans are meant to change." On the third morning, the storm finally broke. The sun came out, brilliant and blinding on the fresh snow, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Austin stood on the porch of the boarding house, looking out at the transformed landscape. Everything was white and pristine, beautiful and harsh in equal measure. "I am going to keep him," he said without preamble when Prudence joined him. "The baby, I want to keep him." Prudence nodded as if she had known all along what his decision would be. "And my offer?" she asked quietly. Austin turned to look at her. In the bright morning light, she was striking, her dark hair loose around her shoulders and her eyes warm with something he could not quite name. "I would be honored if you would come help me raise him," he said. "But I want you to be sure, Prudence. This is not a small thing. You would be giving up your business, your independence, to come live on a ranch in the middle of nowhere and help raise a baby that is not yours." "And not yours either," Prudence pointed out. "But that does not seem to be stopping you." "No," Austin admitted. "It does not." "Then we have an understanding," Prudence said. She held out her hand and Austin shook it, feeling the strength in her grip. "I will need a few weeks to arrange things here, to sell or lease the boarding house, to pack my belongings. But then I will come to your ranch and we will figure out how to be parents to this child." "He needs a name," Austin said suddenly. "We cannot keep calling him the baby." Prudence smiled, the first real smile Austin had seen from her. It transformed her face, made her beautiful in a way that made his breath catch. "What did you have in mind?" Austin thought about the morning he had found the baby, about the cry that had split the frozen dawn, about second chances and new beginnings and the strange twists of fate that brought people together. "Samuel," he said. "After the prophet who was given to God by his mother, it seems fitting for a boy who was given to us." "Samuel Blake," Prudence said, testing the name. "I like it." They stood together on the porch, watching the sun climb higher in the clear blue sky, and Austin felt something shift inside him. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he was not alone. He had a child to raise and a woman who was willing to help him do it. It was not the life he had planned, but it was beginning to feel like the life he was meant to have. The ride back to the ranch was easier than the journey to town had been. The snow was deep, but the wind had died down, and Copper navigated the familiar route with confidence. Austin carried Samuel inside his coat again, but this time Prudence rode beside him on a horse borrowed from the boarding house stable. She had insisted on coming with him immediately, leaving Mrs. Chen in charge of the boarding house until more permanent arrangements could be made. When they reached the ranch, Austin saw it with new eyes. The house that had always seemed adequate for one man suddenly looked small and bare. The barn was sturdy, the fences in good repair, but there was no softness anywhere, no indication that this was a home rather than just a place to sleep between long days of work. "It is not much," he said as he helped Prudence dismount, "but it is solid, warm. I built it myself." "I can see that," Prudence said, looking around with interest. "You have done well here, Austin. How much land do you have?" 2,000 acres, Austin said with quiet pride. "Not all of it is mine outright yet, but I am working on it. I run about 800 head of cattle plus horses. I have 2 ranch hands who come during the busy seasons, but in winter, it is just me." "Not anymore," Prudence said. She was holding Samuel, who had woken during the ride and was looking around with wide, curious eyes. "Now it is all of us." They went inside, and Austin showed Prudence around the house. It did not take long. Downstairs was one large room that served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room, with the big iron stove dominating one end and a table and chairs at the other. Upstairs were 2 bedrooms, one larger and one smaller, both sparsely furnished. "You can take the bigger room," Austin said. "I will move my things to the smaller one, and we will need to figure out where Samuel will sleep. I do not have a cradle or anything." "We will manage," Prudence said. She was already mentally rearranging, Austin could tell. "For now, he can sleep in a drawer padded with blankets. It is not ideal, but it will do until we can get proper furniture. And I will need to send word to Mrs. Chen to bring supplies. Diapers, clothes, milk when I can get it." "About that," Austin said. "The milk. Mrs. Chen cannot keep nursing him forever." "No," Prudence agreed. "We will need to find another solution. Goat's milk, perhaps, or cow's milk diluted with water. It is not as good as mother's milk, but babies can survive on it. I will experiment and see what he tolerates best." Over the next few weeks, they settled into a routine. Prudence moved into the larger bedroom, and Austin took the smaller one, though he spent little time there. The baby slept in Prudence's room, in a cradle that Austin built himself from plans Prudence found in an old book. It was crude but functional, and Samuel seemed content in it. Caring for the baby was harder than Austin had imagined. Samuel woke every few hours through the night, crying to be fed or changed. Austin and Prudence took turns getting up with him, stumbling through the dark house to warm milk and change diapers and walk the floor with a fussy infant who did not understand why the world was so uncomfortable. During the day, Austin tried to keep up with the ranch work, but it was difficult with so little sleep. He checked on the cattle, broke ice on the water troughs, repaired fences damaged by the weight of snow. Prudence stayed in the house with Samuel, but she also cooked and cleaned and managed to make the bare space feel more like a home. She hung curtains in the windows, laid rugs on the floor, and filled the house with the smell of bread baking and stew simmering. They were not married, and Austin was acutely aware of the impropriety of the situation. But they were also 2 adults who had made a practical arrangement to care for a child, and neither of them saw any reason to be ashamed of that. When people from town rode out to investigate the rumors that were already spreading, Austin met them at the door and explained the situation plainly. Prudence was his housekeeper and the baby's nurse. They had a business arrangement, nothing more. Most people seemed to accept that, though Austin knew there was still gossip. But he found he did not care as much as he thought he would. Let them talk. He had more important things to worry about. As the weeks passed, Austin found himself drawn to Prudence in ways he had not anticipated. It was not just that she was beautiful, though she was. It was the way she moved through the house with quiet competence, the way she sang to Samuel in Spanish, the way she laughed at the baby's attempts to grasp at her fingers. It was the way she listened when Austin talked about the ranch, offering suggestions and asking questions that showed she was genuinely interested. It was the way she looked in the morning light, her hair loose and her face soft with sleep, when she came downstairs with Samuel in her arms. Austin was falling in love with her, and he did not know what to do about it. Prudence, for her part, seemed content with their arrangement. She never gave any indication that she wanted more than what they had. She was friendly and warm, but there was a distance there, a line she would not cross. Austin respected that, but it did not stop him from wanting more. Spring came slowly to Washington territory. The snow melted in patches, revealing the brown grass underneath. The cattle grew restless, eager for green pasture. Austin hired his seasonal ranch hands back, two brothers named Tom and Jesse who had worked for him for the past 3 years. They were good men, hardworking and honest, and they seemed unfazed by the presence of Prudence and the baby. "Heard you went and became a family man," Tom said with a grin when he first saw Samuel. "Never thought I would see the day." "Neither did I," Austin admitted, "but here we are." With the extra help, Austin had more time to spend in the house. He found himself gravitating there during the day, finding excuses to come in for coffee or to check on Samuel. The baby was growing, filling out and becoming more alert. He smiled now, a gummy grin that made Austin's heart melt every time. He made sounds, not quite words but attempts at communication. He was learning to focus his eyes, to track movement, to reach for things. "He knows you," Prudence said one afternoon, watching as Samuel's eyes followed Austin across the room. "Look how he lights up when he sees you." Austin felt a swell of emotion so strong it almost hurt. This baby, this tiny person who had come into his life by accident, had become the center of his world. He could not imagine his life without Samuel now. Could not imagine waking up without hearing that demanding cry or going to bed without checking one last time that the baby was breathing. "I love him," Austin said, the words surprising him even as he spoke them. "I did not expect to, but I do." "I know," Prudence said softly. "I love him too." Their eyes met, and Austin saw something in her gaze that made his pulse quicken. But before he could say anything, Samuel started crying, and the moment was broken. By the time summer arrived, Samuel was 6 months old. He could sit up with support, could grasp objects and bring them to his mouth, could laugh out loud at things that amused him. He was a happy baby, content and curious, and Austin took fierce pride in every milestone. The ranch was thriving too. The cattle had calved successfully, and the new crop of horses Austin was raising was strong and healthy. He had paid off another chunk of his land debt and was beginning to think about expanding his herd. For the first time in his life, Austin felt like he had everything he needed. Except he did not, because every time he looked at Prudence, he wanted more. He wanted to hold her hand across the dinner table. He wanted to kiss her goodnight. He wanted to tell her that she had become as essential to him as breathing, that he could not imagine his life without her any more than he could imagine it without Samuel. But he held back, afraid of ruining what they had. Afraid that if he spoke his feelings, Prudence would leave, and he would lose both her and the family they had built together. Then one evening in July, everything changed. Austin had been out late, dealing with a cow that had gotten stuck in a creek bed. By the time he got back to the house, cleaned up and came inside, it was well past dark. He expected to find Prudence and Samuel already asleep, but instead, he found Prudence sitting in the rocking chair by the window, holding the baby and looking out at the stars. "Is everything all right?" Austin asked, concerned. Prudence turned to him, and in the lamplight he could see that she had been crying. "I received a letter today," she said, "from California. My father is ill. He is asking me to come home." Austin felt the bottom drop out of his world. "You are leaving." "I do not know," Prudence said, and her voice was anguished. "He is my father, Austin. I cannot simply ignore his request, but I do not want to go. This is my home now. You and Samuel, this is my family." Austin crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. Samuel was asleep in her arms, oblivious to the turmoil around him. "Then do not go," Austin said urgently. "Send word that you cannot come. Hire someone to care for him if he needs help, but do not leave us." "I do not want to," Prudence repeated, "but I do not know if I have the right to stay." "What do you mean?" Prudence looked at him, her dark eyes swimming with tears. "We are not really a family, Austin. We are two people who made an arrangement to care for a child. You have never said otherwise. You have never suggested that we are more than that." Austin's heart was pounding. "Is that what you want? To be more?" "I want to be your wife," Prudence said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I want to be Samuel's mother, truly and legally. I want to wake up beside you and know that I am not going to spend the rest of my life alone. But I do not know if you want that." "You have never said." "I have been afraid," Austin admitted. "Afraid that if I told you how I felt, you would leave. But Prudence, I love you. I have loved you for months now. I look at you and I see the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. I see the mother of my children, even though Samuel is not mine by blood. I see my partner, my friend, the person I want beside me through whatever comes." Prudence made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You love me." "I love you," Austin confirmed. He reached up and touched her face, wiping away the tears with his thumb. "I love you so much that it scares me. I never thought I would feel this way about anyone, but you came into my life and you changed everything." "I love you too," Prudence whispered. "I have been so afraid to say it, but I do. I love you, Austin Blake. I want to be your wife." Austin stood and pulled her to her feet, careful of the baby sleeping in her arms. He kissed her then, a soft, sweet kiss that tasted of salt from her tears and promise for the future. Prudence kissed him back, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "We should get married," Austin said. "Properly, I want to do this right." "Yes," Prudence agreed. "But what about my father? Write to him," Austin suggested. "Tell him you cannot come, but offer to send money for his care. Tell him you have a family here, a husband and a child who need you. If he loves you, he will understand." Prudence nodded slowly. "I will write tomorrow," she said. "But tonight I just want to be here with you." They put Samuel to bed together, tucking the blankets around him and watching him sleep for a moment. Then Austin took Prudence's hand and led her downstairs. They sat together on the sofa, Prudence's head on Austin's shoulder, and talked about the future. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Kennewick. Tom and Jesse stood as witnesses, and Mrs. Chen brought Samuel, who gurgled happily through the whole service. Prudence wore a dress of pale blue that brought out the warmth in her dark eyes, and Austin wore his best suit, feeling uncomfortable and proud in equal measure. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Austin kissed Prudence with all the love and joy he had been holding back for months. The small congregation applauded, and Samuel made a loud noise that might have been approval or might have just been gas, but either way, it made everyone laugh. The celebration was modest but heartfelt. Prudence's former boarders had come, as had several people from town who had gotten to know Austin and Prudence over the months. There was food and music and dancing, and for one perfect afternoon, Austin allowed himself to simply be happy. That night, in the bedroom they now officially shared, Austin made love to his wife with tenderness and passion. Prudence responded with equal fervor, and afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, listening to Samuel's soft breathing from the cradle nearby. "I never thought I could be this happy," Prudence whispered, After everything that happened after losing my daughter, I thought that part of my life was over. It was not over, Austin said. It was just waiting for the right time. And the right person, Prudence added. She rolled over to face him, her hand resting on his chest. I meant what I said in my vows, Austin. I will love you and stand beside you for the rest of our lives. And I meant what I said, Austin replied. You are my heart, Prudence. You and Samuel, you are everything. They fell asleep in each other's arms, and when Samuel woke a few hours later crying for his midnight feeding, they got up together, working as the team they had become. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch continued to prosper, and Austin was able to purchase the remaining land he had been leasing, making him one of the larger landowners in the area. Samuel grew from a baby into a toddler and then a young boy, bright and curious and deeply loved. He called Austin Papa and Prudence Mama, and if anyone in the family remembered that he had not been born to them, it did not matter. When Samuel was 3, Prudence told Austin she was pregnant. Austin's joy was boundless, though tinged with worry for Prudence, knowing what she had lost before. But this pregnancy was different. Prudence was healthy and strong, and when their daughter was born in the spring of 1886, it felt like their family was finally complete. They named her Rose, for the wild roses that grew along the creek on their property. She had Prudence's dark hair and Austin's green eyes, and from the moment she was born, Samuel was utterly devoted to his little sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, singing to her in the same mixture of English and Spanish that Prudence had sung to him when he was a baby. 2 years later, Prudence gave birth to twin boys, and the house that had once seemed too small for one man now rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing. Austin hired help to build an addition, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen, and the ranch house became a true home, filled with life and love. Samuel grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like Austin, but with a gentleness that was all his own. He never asked about his birth parents, seemingly content with the family he had. Austin and Prudence never hid the truth from him, but they also never made it a central part of his identity. He was their son in every way that mattered, and that was enough. The mystery of who had left Samuel on Austin's doorstep was never solved. There was speculation over the years, theories about desperate mothers and tragic circumstances, but no one ever came forward to claim him. Austin thought about it sometimes, wondering about the woman who had wrapped her baby in wool and left him in the freezing cold, trusting that he would be found and cared for. He hoped she had found peace, wherever she was. He hoped she knew that her child had been loved beyond measure. On a warm summer evening in 1895, when Samuel was 13 and already showing signs of the man he would become, the family gathered on the porch after dinner. Rose was playing with her dolls, and the twins were chasing fireflies in the yard. Prudence sat beside Austin on the bench he had built, her hand in his, and they watched their children with the quiet satisfaction of people who had built a good life together. "You ever think about that morning?" Prudence asked softly. "The morning you found Samuel?" "Sometimes," Austin admitted. "It is strange to think how different everything would be if I had made different choices that day, if I had just taken him to the sheriff, or if you had not offered to help. Our whole life turned on those few moments." "I believe we were meant to find each other," Prudence said. "All of us. You and me and Samuel. We were meant to be a family." "I believe that too," Austin said. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Prudence Blake. You and our children." "And you are mine," Prudence replied. "My love, my partner, my home." Samuel looked over at them from where he was helping the twins catch fireflies, and he grinned. "You two are always so mushy," he called out, but there was affection in his voice. "You just wait," Austin called back. "Someday you will understand." "Maybe," Samuel said with the confidence of youth. "But I doubt I will ever be as mushy as you, Papa." Prudence laughed, the sound bright and joyful in the evening air. Austin pulled her close, and they sat together watching the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The future stretched out before them, uncertain as all futures are, but Austin was not afraid. Whatever came, they would face it together. This family that had been built from chance and choice and an abandoned baby on a snowy doorstep. The years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Seasons changed, children grew, and the love between Austin and Prudence only deepened. They faced challenges, of course. There were years when the cattle prices fell and money was tight. There were illnesses and injuries, the normal trials of raising a family on the frontier. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything bearable. Samuel proved to have a gift for working with horses. By the time he was 16, he was breaking and training colts with a patience and skill that amazed even Austin. The boy had grown tall and broad-shouldered, with his mother's dark coloring and his father's steady gaze. He was kind but strong, gentle but capable, and Austin knew without doubt that the ranch would be in good hands when the time came to pass it on. Rose was different from her brother, more fiery and independent. She learned to ride almost before she could walk, and she insisted on helping with the ranch work alongside her brothers. Prudence worried sometimes that Rose was too wild, too unladylike, but Austin encouraged her spirit. The world was changing, and a woman who could think for herself and stand on her own 2 feet would do better than one who had been taught only to be decorative. The twins, Michael and David, were inseparable and mischievous. They got into everything, always together, always plotting some new adventure. They kept the household in a constant state of mild chaos, but they were also loving and loyal, and Austin could not imagine the family without them. In 1898, when Samuel turned 16, Austin had a conversation with him that he had been both anticipating and dreading. They were out checking the fence line together, just the two of them, when Austin finally broached the subject. "Samuel," he began, "there is something your mother and I have always wanted you to know about how you came to us." Samuel looked at him with those steady dark eyes. "I know I was left on the doorstep, Papa," he said calmly. "I have always known. Mama told me when I was little, and I have heard the stories in town." Austin was surprised. "And it does not bother you," Samuel shrugged. "Why should it? I have a family who loves me. I have parents who chose me, even though they did not have to. That means more than blood, does it not?" "It does," Austin said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I wanted you to know that if you ever want to try to find out where you came from, we would support you. We would help you." Samuel was quiet for a moment, looking out over the rolling hills of the ranch. "I already know where I come from," he said finally. "I come from here. This ranch, this family, that is all I need to know." Austin put a hand on his son's shoulder, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Samuel smiled at him, understanding and acceptance clear in his expression. "Besides," Samuel added, his tone lightening, "if whoever left me had kept me, I would not have you and Mama and Rose and the twins. I would not have this life. So I think things worked out the way they were supposed to." Austin pulled his son into a rough embrace, and Samuel hugged him back with the unself-conscious affection of a young man who had never doubted his place in the world. That evening, Austin told Prudence about the conversation. They were in their bedroom getting ready for sleep, and Prudence smiled through her tears when Austin finished the story. "He is a remarkable young man," she said. "We raised him well. "We did," Austin agreed. He pulled her into his arms and they stood together in the lamplight, holding each other as they had done countless times over the years. "Thank you, Prudence, for taking a chance on me and on Samuel, for building this life with me." "Thank you for letting me," Prudence replied. "You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. A family, a purpose, love." They kissed, a slow, sweet kiss that still made Austin's heart race even after all these years. Some things never changed, and the love between them was one of those things. As the new century approached, the Blake Ranch had become one of the most successful in the region. Austin had built a reputation for honesty and quality, and his horses and cattle were in high demand. He had expanded the house again, adding a proper parlor and a study, and the property now included several outbuildings and a bunkhouse for the hired hands. But the greatest success, Austin knew, was the family he had built. His children were healthy and happy. His wife was his best friend and truest love, and the baby who had been left on his doorstep had grown into a man any father would be proud of. Samuel began courting a girl from town when he was 18, a sweet-natured young woman named Emily, whose father ran the general store. Austin and Prudence liked her immediately, and when Samuel announced his intention to marry her, they gave their blessing without hesitation. The wedding was held at the ranch in the summer of 1900, and it was a grand affair. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to celebrate. Prudence cried through the entire ceremony, happy tears that she made no attempt to hide. Austin stood beside his son, watching him make his vows, and felt the weight of time and change and continuity all at once. After the wedding, Samuel and Emily built a small house on the eastern edge of the ranch property. Samuel continued to work with Austin, gradually taking on more responsibility, and Austin began to think seriously about the future. He was 50 years old now, not old by any means, but he could feel the years in his bones on cold mornings. It was time to start thinking about what would come next. He and Prudence talked about it one evening in the fall of that year. The children were all in bed and they sat together by the fire enjoying the quiet. "Samuel is ready," Austin said, "to take over the ranch, maybe not tomorrow but soon." Prudence nodded. "I have been thinking the same thing." "He has your talent for it, Austin, and Emily is a good partner for him. She will support him the way I have supported you." "What would we do?" Austin asked. "If we stepped back from the day-to-day running of things," Prudence smiled. "We would do whatever we wanted. We could travel, see some of the country we have never seen. We could spend time with our grandchildren when they come. We could just be together without always having one eye on the work that needs to be done." Austin liked the sound of that. "Grandchildren," he mused. "That is a strange thought." "Not so strange," Prudence said. "Samuel and Emily will start a family soon, I expect. And Rose is already attracting attention from the young men in town, though she pretends not to notice." "She is too young to be thinking about marriage," Austin said, his protective instincts flaring. Prudence laughed. "She is 17, the same age I was when I married my first husband, though I hope she waits a bit longer and chooses more wisely than I did." "She will," Austin said with confidence. "She has you as an example of what a strong woman looks like." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire. Austin thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that frozen morning when he had found Samuel to this warm autumn evening with his whole family safe under his roof. It had not been an easy path, but it had been worth every struggle. "Prudence," he said suddenly, "do you remember what you said to me that day in your boarding house, when you offered to come help me raise Samuel?" "I said a lot of things that day," Prudence replied. "Which part do you mean?" "You said that sometimes the crazy choice is the right one," Austin said. "That has stayed with me all these years, because you were right. Keeping Samuel was crazy. Letting you come to the ranch was crazy. Getting married after knowing each other for only a few months was crazy. But it was also the best decision I ever made. Prudence leaned her head on his shoulder. We made it together, she said. That is what makes it right. We chose each other, chose this life, chose to build something from nothing, and look what we have created. A legacy, Austin said. Not just the land or the cattle or the house, but a family. That is what we have built, you and I. A family that will go on long after we are gone. A family built on love, Prudence added. That is the best kind. They went to bed that night with a sense of peace and satisfaction. The future was uncertain, as it always was, but they would face it together, as they had faced everything for the past 18 years. True to their predictions, Samuel and Emily had their first child in the spring of 1901, a healthy baby boy they named James. Austin held his grandson for the first time and felt the circle complete. He thought of Samuel as he had been, a tiny infant wrapped in wool, and now here was Samuel's son, the next generation. He is beautiful, Prudence said, looking over Austin's shoulder at the baby. He has Samuel's nose. He does, Austin agreed. He looked at Samuel, who was hovering nervously nearby, and grinned. Welcome to fatherhood, son. I hope you are ready for sleepless nights and constant worry. I had good teachers, Samuel said, smiling. I figure if you and Mama could handle me, I can handle him. Over the next few years, the Blake family continued to grow. Samuel and Emily had 2 more children, a daughter and another son. Rose married a young rancher from the next county over, a good man who treated her with respect and admiration. The twins finished school and began to talk about their own futures. Michael wanting to study law and David thinking about joining the cavalry. Austin and Prudence gradually stepped back from the daily running of the ranch. Though Austin still spent time working with the horses, and Prudence still managed the household. They traveled some, taking a trip to San Francisco that Prudence had always dreamed of, and another to St. Louis where Austin had family he had not seen in decades. But mostly, they enjoyed the life they had built. They spent time with their grandchildren, teaching them to ride and telling them stories. They worked in the garden Prudence had created over the years, growing vegetables and flowers. They sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set, counting their blessings. On a mild spring evening in 1910, as they sat together on that same porch, Austin looked at his wife of nearly 3 decades and marveled at how little she had changed. Oh, there was silver in her dark hair now and lines around her eyes, but to him she was as beautiful as she had been the first time he really saw her, standing in the doorway of her boarding house with snow swirling around her. "What are you thinking about?" Prudence asked, catching him staring. "About how lucky I am," Austin said honestly. "About how one moment, one decision can change the entire course of a life." "You are thinking about the morning you found Samuel," Prudence said. "It was not a question." "I am," Austin admitted. 28 years ago now. Sometimes it feels like yesterday and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." "Both are true," Prudence said. "It was a lifetime, the lifetime we have lived together." Samuel came around the corner of the house at that moment, his son James, now 9 years old, riding on his shoulders. "Mama, Papa," Samuel called. "We are heading home for supper. Emily is waiting for us." "Go on," Austin said, waving them off. "Give our love to Emily and the children." Samuel nodded and started to leave, but then he paused and turned back. "Papa," he said, "I just want you to know I am grateful for everything you and Mama have done, for the life you have given me. I know I do not say it enough, but I am." Austin felt his throat tighten. "You do not need to say it, son, we know." "I love you both," Samuel said simply, and then he was gone, carrying his son home through the gathering dusk. Prudence wiped at her eyes. "That boy," she said, her voice shaky. "That man, he has grown into something wonderful." "We all have," Austin said. He pulled her close, and they sat together as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "We have all grown into something wonderful." The years continued their steady march. Austin and Prudence grew older, but they grew older together, and that made all the difference. They watched their children build their own lives and families. They delighted in their grandchildren, of which there were eventually 12 in total. They saw the world change around them, the old frontier giving way to modern conveniences and new ways of thinking. But some things remained constant. The ranch endured, passed now to Samuel's capable hands. The love between Austin and Prudence endured, as strong in their 7th decade as it had been in their first years together. And the family they had built endured, a testament to the power of choice and love and commitment. On a warm summer day in 1920, the Blake family gathered for a celebration. It was Austin and Prudence's 38th wedding anniversary, and their children and grandchildren had insisted on marking the occasion with a party. The ranch house and yard were filled with people, 3 generations of Blakes, all descended from or connected to that tiny infant who had been left in the cold so long ago. Austin, now 70 years old but still strong and clear-eyed, stood on the porch and looked out at his family. Samuel was there with Emily and their children, all grown now with families of their own. Rose was there with her husband and their brood. The twins had both married, and their children ran wild with their cousins in the yard. Prudence stood beside him, as she always had, and Austin took her hand. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked her. "When you made that crazy offer to come help me raise a foundling baby?" "No," Prudence said honestly. "I imagined companionship, perhaps, purpose, but this is beyond anything I could have dreamed." Samuel approached them, a glass of cider in each hand. He handed them to his parents with a smile. "Mama, Papa," he said, "we wanted to make a toast. To you, to the family you built and the love you have shown us all. We are who we are because of you." The yard grew quiet as everyone turned to listen. Samuel raised his own glass. "To Austin and Prudence Blake," he said, his voice carrying clearly. "The best parents anyone could ask for. Thank you for choosing love, for choosing family, for choosing me when you did not have to. Everything good in my life comes from that choice." "To Austin and Prudence," the family chorused, raising their glasses. Austin felt tears on his cheeks, and he did not bother to wipe them away. He looked at Prudence and saw his own emotion reflected in her eyes. "To family," Austin said, his voice rough with feeling. "To the crazy choices that turn out to be the right ones. To the love that sustains us through everything. And to you, Prudence, my wife, my partner, my heart. You are my greatest blessing." "And you are mine," Prudence said. She kissed him then, in front of their entire family, and the yard erupted in cheers and applause. As the party continued around them, Austin and Prudence sat together on the porch, watching their family celebrate. Children chased each other across the lawn. Adults talked and laughed and ate. Music played, someone had brought a fiddle, and couples danced in the fading light. "We did good," Austin said quietly. "We did very good," Prudence agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who had shared a life and built something beautiful together. The sun set slowly, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and the stars began to emerge one by one. Austin thought about that frozen morning in December of 1882, when a baby's cry had changed his life forever. He thought about the choices he had made, the risks he had taken, the love he had found. He thought about the family that had grown from that single moment of compassion and courage. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that he would not change a single thing. The party wound down as darkness fell. Families packed up their children and headed home, calling out goodbyes and promises to visit soon. Samuel was the last to leave, stopping to embrace both his parents tightly. "Thank you," he said again, "for everything." "Thank you," Austin replied, "for being exactly who you are. For making me a father when I never thought I would be. For filling my life with purpose and joy." Samuel smiled, that same gummy grin that Austin remembered from when he was a baby, now expressed through the weathered face of a middle-aged man. "I love you, Papa. I love you, Mama." "We love you too, son," Prudence said. "Always have, always will." When Samuel was gone, Austin and Prudence went inside to their quiet house. They climbed the stairs to their bedroom, the same room Prudence had moved into all those years ago. The house was silent now, empty of children for the first time in decades, but it did not feel lonely. It felt peaceful. They got ready for bed with the comfortable routine of long marriage. Austin hung up his good jacket while Prudence brushed out her long silver hair. They met in the middle of the bed, as they had done thousands of times before, and Austin pulled Prudence into his arms. "No regrets?" he asked, a question he had asked before and would probably ask again. "Not a single one," Prudence replied, the answer she always gave. "This life, this family, it is all I ever wanted even before I knew I wanted it." "Same here," Austin said. He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I love you, Prudence Blake, today, tomorrow, forever." "And I love you, Austin Blake," Prudence replied. "My cowboy, my rancher, my husband, my love. Thank you for finding that baby on your doorstep. Thank you for being brave enough to keep him. Thank you for letting me be part of your life." "Our life," Austin corrected. "It has always been our life from the moment you offered to help." "We built this together." "Yes," Prudence agreed, snuggling closer. "We did." They fell asleep in each other's arms, two people who had found love in the most unexpected way and built a life that would echo through generations. Outside, the stars shone down on the ranch, on the house where so much love had been shared, on the land that would be passed down through the Blake family for years to come. And somewhere in the night, if anyone had been listening, they might have heard the faint echo of a baby's cry, the sound that had started it all. But it was not a cry of distress anymore. It was a cry of joy, of life, of love. It was the sound of a family being born. The Blake Ranch continued to thrive long after Austin and Prudence were gone. Samuel ran it with the same dedication and skill his father had shown, and he passed it on to his own children in turn. The story of the foundling baby who had been left on Austin Blake's doorstep became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. But more than the story, what endured was the legacy of love that Austin and Prudence had built. They had shown that family was not just about blood, but about choice and commitment and showing up every day to do the hard work of loving someone. They had shown that it was never too late to start over, to take a chance, to build something beautiful from the ashes of what had been. Their love story became the foundation on which the entire Blake family was built, a reminder that the best things in life often come when we least expect them, wrapped in wool on a frozen doorstep, waiting for someone brave enough to bring them in from the cold. And in the end, that is all any of us can hope for, to be brave enough to love, to choose family over fear, and to build a life worth remembering. Austin and Prudence Blake did exactly that, and their legacy lived on in every child who bore their name, in every grandchild who heard their story, in every generation that followed. They had taken a chance on a baby who was not theirs, and in doing so, they had found each other. They had built a family from nothing, created a legacy of love that would outlast them both. And when the end came for each of them, years later, They died knowing that their lives had mattered, that they had made a difference, that they had loved and been loved in return. That frozen morning in December had been the beginning of everything. A baby's cry in the snow, a rancher's compassion, a widow's courage, and the love that grew from those simple seeds. It was a story worthy of the Wild West, but it was also a story as old as time itself. The story of love found, family made, and a life well lived. And they all lived happily ever after, exactly as they deserved.